Lieutenant Colonel Andriy Pomahaibus, head of the planning department of the S3 section of Ukraine's Khartia Brigade, noted that Russia is deploying its infantry in multiple directions simultaneously to divert the attention of Ukrainian defenders. The Khartia Brigade is currently operating in the Kharkiv direction and the situation remains under control. Russia is attempting to move its manpower to the front line, but Ukrainian defenders are effectively preventing these efforts. The enemy's planning is weak and they rely on a single tactic: meat assaults. Since their equipment is highly vulnerable due to the effective use of drone systems on our part, the occupiers primarily conduct assault operations with infantry. In some directions, they send their infantry in columns to scatter our attention, commented the head of the planning section S3 of the Khartia Brigade on Espresso TV. According to him, the majority of Russian infantry consists of convicts who receive no training. They are sent forward in an attempt to establish at least some foothold in the forested areas. However, during attacks, Russian soldiers have only one option: to advance towards Ukrainian positions, because retreat is not an option, as they would be met with gunfire from their own side. However, they still have a chance to survive if they approach and surrender to the Ukrainian side. If we recall the Second World War, it was not about good planning or well-trained personnel, but about the sheer amount of manpower, and this is how the Russians fight now. When the resource is superior, it will work. Right now, the manpower ratio is, for example, 1 to 10, and in such a situation, it is very difficult to maintain defense. This is why we are working with the civilian population to replenish the Khartia Brigade and mobilize it, informing them about the work of commanders and high-quality military training, said Andriy Pomahaibus. All of this, Western officials say, means Moscow can keep throwing soldiers, even if poorly trained, straight onto the front lines at the same rate they are being killed or wounded. Vladimir Putin is counting on wearing down Ukraine on the battlefield and outlasting the West's resolve to provide support, as well as launching guided aerial bombs against frontline positions and civilians.
U.S. President Donald Trump laid out the reciprocal tariff rates that more than 180 countries and territories will face under his sweeping new trade policy. The announcement sent stocks tumbling and prompted investors to seek refuge in assets perceived to be safe. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said that Donald Trump's decision to impose new tariffs on all goods entering the U.S. is a major blow to the world economy. She said the new tax imports will see uncertainty spiral, causing dire consequences for millions of people around the globe. China's Commerce Ministry called for Washington to immediately cancel the tariffs, warning they endanger global economic development and would hurt U.S. interests and international supply chains. South Korea's acting president, Han Duck-soo, has vowed an all-out response as Asia's fourth biggest economy reeled from Thursday's imposition of 25% tariffs on its exports to the U.S. Han instructed senior officials to urgently address the crisis during an emergency meeting of his Economic and Security Strategy Task Force, the Yonhap news agency reported. As the situation is very grave with the approach of the reality of a global tariff war, the government must pour out all of its capabilities at its disposal to overcome this trade crisis, Han said. Japan Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba said, "Japan is a country that is making the largest amount of investment to the United States, so we wonder if it makes sense for Washington to apply uniform tariffs to all countries." Trade and Industry Minister Yoji Muto described the tariffs as extremely regrettable and said Tokyo was still attempting to persuade the Trump administration to think again. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said that although no one got a better deal than Australia, the new tariff regime was a hostile act against an ally. Italy's Giorgia Meloni, a Trump ally, said the decision was wrong, but that she would work towards a deal with the U.S. to prevent a trade war. Her Spanish counterpart Pedro Sanchez said Spain would continue to be committed to an open world, while in Ireland, Taoiseach Michael Martin said Trump's decision was deeply regrettable and benefited no one. In Latin America, its biggest economy, Brazil, approved a law in Congress on Wednesday, the Economic Reciprocity Law, to counter the 10% tariff imposed by Trump. The Foreign Ministry said it would evaluate all possible actions to ensure reciprocity in bilateral trade, including resorting to the World Trade Organization. Prime Minister of New Zealand Christopher Luxon said New Zealand had fared better, relatively, to other countries with a 10% levy, but said tariffs and trade wars were not the way to go. Canada has been exempted from the latest tariffs but still faces 25% levies on steel and aluminum, as well as on automobiles, which came into effect at midnight Eastern Time. Prime Minister Mark Carney said that he would fight these tariffs with countermeasures and build the strongest economy in the G7. Like Canada, Mexico has been exempted from the latest set of tariffs but still faces previously announced levies announced by Trump. President Claudia Sheinbaum said that the country would not pursue a tit-for-tat on tariffs, but would rather announce a comprehensive program. Taiwan's cabinet has called the tariffs very unreasonable and said it would take up the matter with the U.S. government. The Thai government said in a statement that the levies will inevitably impact all trading partners, particularly affecting American consumers' purchasing power, who may not be able to absorb the rapid price increases. During the full-scale war against Ukraine, Russia lost almost 10% of its fleet of Tu-22M strategic missile carriers. Forbes writes about this, analyzing yesterday's crash of one of them. Before the invasion of Ukraine, Russia is believed to have had about 62 Tu-22MS, upgraded versions of Cold War-era bombers that carry various types of cruise missiles. Before yesterday's crash, the Russian Air Force had already lost 4 of the aircraft. 1 crashed, 1 was shot down and 2 were destroyed or at least badly damaged by Ukrainian drone strikes on their airfield. In addition, a series of drone strikes on the Engels airbase from January to March destroyed a huge stockpile of cruise missiles that the bombers were launching. Forbes estimates the value of the lost missiles at nearly $1 billion. And although the Tu-22M launches missiles at Ukraine from a safe distance, each of their flights has certain risks, the author of the publication notes. After all, we are talking about aircraft designed in the 1960s and built in the 1970s and 80s. The Kh-22 missiles, although still being manufactured, were also designed in the 1960s. Nothing is more exciting than flying an ancient rocket containing 4 tons of hypergolic fuel, joked aviation expert Bill Sweetman. At the same time, Forbes acknowledges that the loss of 5 Tu-22MS in more than 3 years of full-scale war will not affect its course in any way. The Russians still have enough surviving Tu-22MS and other types of bombers, such as the Tu-95 and Tu-160, to bomb Ukraine in the foreseeable future. As reported, a Tu-22M3 strategic bomber missile carrier crashed in Russia the day before. According to available information, the plane crashed in the Irkutsk region. There were 4 crew members on board. It seems that all the pilots were able to eject, but one of them still died. The causes of the accident are not known. Military expert Mikhail Zyrikov noted that we are talking about fairly old aircraft that have some technical problems during almost every flight. The general public is almost unaware of this.